have done. Harlem has a very interesting history, as you know itself. When they built the IRT subway in 1904, that opened up this farmland all up through Lenox Avenue. These were farms back in those days. And when they built the IRT, which is the Lenox Avenue line, that opened up this avenue. So speculators, like they're doing now, came in and built up this Harlem area. And they overbuilt, like they have done today. And the speculation began to taper off. And then it got so bad that they couldn't rent the places. Very interesting. There was a black fellow, I can't remember his name, but if you want to, I'll look it up for you. He'd gone to Hampton Institute studying real estate. Payton was his name. So when they found out they couldn't rent this, he got an idea. Let me rent it to my people. They said, get out of here, my people can't afford it. How do you I got a plan. Of course, you know what the plan is. They will double up and they can afford the rent. So they didn't believe him. So they let him have a couple of buildings and he filled them. They were shocked. That took on a life of its own and mushroomed because the black situation in Harlem had been so destabilized, starting first in the Wall Street area where blacks were, where Wall Street is now, in the village where Thompson Street is now, where Washington Square Park. It's a black neighborhood. Blacks were constantly pushed out of neighborhoods. So after being pushed out from the village in Thompson Square, they moved up to Hell's Kitchen. 59th Street, 8th Avenue, around that area became a black community. Well, they were soon eventually pushed up by the Irish out of that into what is known as Central Park, which is also way up in the country in a derelict place. Okay, so blacks moved in around 89th, but from 86th to 89th Street in Central Park was a black community, a thriving black community. Abyssinia Church, which had been downtown, moved into there. And a lot of the prominent blacks in Black Spirit moved into Central Park. Well, Central Park was also a derelict country place way up in the country. But when they decided to make it which is the most beautiful park in the world, a park, they kicked everybody out, of course, including the blacks. Now where are the blacks going to go? They didn't have a place to go. When this opened in 1904, and this guy began to rent out, now they've got a way to come, and here they come. And the rest is history. We've been here ever since. How has it changed? Gentrification. 125th Street is not the same, and by the way, it's going to be even changed more as soon as the zoning law has been passed. From 124th Street to 126th Street will be a corridor zoned for commercial businesses. Those little mama pop type shops you see along there, all that will be gone. But the old Harlem culture as we know it, as the center of fashion, the center of music, the center of just about every progressive movement and everything else we have here, dances and all of that. Harlem has a rich history of just about everything. As a matter of fact, I've traveled around the world. They say, where are you from? If you say Harlem is all you need to say. Everybody in the world knows Harlem. They know America, yes. They know New York, I've heard of Harlem, yes. Those are the three things they know about this country. America, New York, Harlem. And everybody likes Harlem. So Harlem has a reputation of being this creative black metropolis where innovative ideas and creativity was rampant. All of that will change when you change the demographics of the neighborhood. You bring in all the new innovations and the gentrification, you lose that creativity that comes from struggling. Historically in America, they didn't want to live with us. They isolated us. We were the invisible man.
Is there something that you can define as an essential Lenox Terrace culture, character?
The one thing that stood out when I bought the Choctaw Nuts and moved into Lenox Terrace was that the professionalism of the place. I had looked around at other places to live. I decided, well, I'm going to try, even though I'd visited Harlem quite a bit, the Smalls and other nice spots there. I never lived in Harlem. So I looked around for places to live, and of course no place compared to Lenox Terrace. 6 17-story buildings that catered, that's an adult community. So it's not a lot of kids here. This place wasn't built for children, it was an adult community. And you had a lot of prominent professional adults here, which made the atmosphere very professional. We had clubs, several nightclubs were in the development. Another one of the interesting things, nightclubs. You mentioned 22 West a few minutes ago, and Jim Austin. Jim Austin on the 22 West, which is at 22 West 135th Street. There was a barber shop beside 22 West. Mr. Phillips, who lived across the street in Clayton houses, there was my barber. Mr. Phillips had been the barber to celebrities. So when I bought the store, and I asked them around, where could I find a barber? They said, go down to, beside 22 West, there's a barber shop there. I think it was called Lennox Terry's. And all the barbers there were old, so the first barber I went in there was at the first chair. His name was Mr. Phillips, and he owned the barber shop. I didn't know it, of course, and he now became, he was much older than I was. He told me a lot about Harlem. He lived there, and about the people whose hair he's cut. He cut everybody's hair. So while we're sitting there talking, in walked Moms Mabley. Do you remember who Moms Mabley was? She was a funny lady. Now, I had never seen her in person, but I'm sitting there getting a haircut, and she came in, and she had this way of speaking. You remember her? And she cracked up the joint there, but this was the barber shop there, so I got a chance to meet some of those celebrities when I went in to get my haircut. But when business began to sort of fall off after about a year here, I decided that I need another business in the neighborhood to support and sustain what I wanted to do. So I went down to talk to Jimmy Austin about buying 22 West. This is before I bought the Beef and Bun downtown, that I was going to buy 22 West. And he and I began to hit it off very well. But 22 West, first of all, only had one entrance. It had a back door downstairs and out the back. You have to have two entrances. So I wanted to know if I could buy that barber shop next door and extend 22 West. So he didn't think that was a good idea, but he said, you can talk to the guy. He gave me his name. The guy wasn't a barber. He owned the barber shop, and he rented it out and came and got the money. He didn't cut hair or anything. So he said, yeah, he'd be willing to let it go for a fee and all of that. So then I went back to Jimmy Austin, who owned 22 West. I said, okay, let's make a deal. And he and I hashed out a deal where I would buy 22 West, and I'm also going to buy the barber shop next door and bring it together. So first I have to do a feasibility study. So I had to come up. You have to be 200 feet from the entrance of a church or a school in order for a liquor establishment. The entrance of 22 West was 198 feet, not 200 feet. So you cannot have a liquor establishment going through the door to 22 West. But the barber shop was 204 feet away from the school around the corner, so that would be fine. So now it's a deal. I can buy it because we can have two entrances, one to 22 West and one to the bar, and then they connect inside. We got all the things going. I asked him where to get supplies. We got all this meat from David, the meat masters around it, because they were partners and all of that. They were involved in the union together, and also Jimmy owned a funeral hall, a funeral parlor up in the Bronx. So we said we're gonna close the deal on Monday down at Darwin's office. Darwin's doing, but he was at 4th and Madison. We go down and we'll close the deal. So Jimmy agreed. He said, well, Jimmy, bring your books down so we can go through everything. Jimmy showed up, no books. You have to take my word for it. He never produced the books, and the deal fell through. He never produced the books. He took the idea, he got together with the barbershop there, and he bought it and expanded it, so he had the whole thing there. That was also another very nice, interesting place right here called the Club Baron. Club Baron. You're right, Club Baron. Yeah, that was an interesting place too. So the community was a viable community. Here was a symbol of hope and achievement for us. I explained to you all the places we lived in New York, from downtown, midtown, to Center Park, and finally we have found a home that's like no other place in America. Excuse me, in America. It's a place where blacks actually began to say, this is home. And the showcase of Harlem, aside from all the other things like entertainment and all the other things that drew everybody here, was Lennox Terrace. Now you've got a place that you can live in your own neighborhood, in your own development, that is equal to any place in the city, so to speak. So yes, the changes have been not so much in the interest of the tenants. The tenants today are not as professional. There's not the number of professional people here as they were before. But Lennox Terrace is still one of the nicer places to live, all in all. The rooms are still spacious. The rents are reasonable. The new buildings, of course, are put up on. The facilities are much smaller than this. And a lot of people are moving out of Lennox Terrace to take on the newer developments. And the new developments look nice. I looked at them. They're very nice, but the Lennox Terrace still has the reputation of being the center for professionalism, I'd say, in Harlem. It still stands out as the premier place to live in Harlem. Benny was the founder of the Commodores that he picked up down in Tuskegee, Alabama. They were students at Tuskegee, Alabama. And Ben at the time was a social worker. And he approached me. He used to eat in a restaurant every day, and asked me about that, and was I willing to put in some little finances, which I did, not very much. I didn't think that they had a chance at the time because there were so many bands. Every place in Harlem had a band. Harlem used to have 2 or 3 bars in every block, and every bar had a band. So the most famous named bands could be seen in small nightclubs. For instance, Count Basis was 1 block away. You remember Count Basis? He was there all the time, and every little bar had that. So Harlem was alive and it had all of this creativity here. But Lenox Terrace took on a new dimension. It took on a dimension of where the intellectual Harlemites could live. We had places to party and to socialize, but our living conditions left something to be desired. Because remember, Harlem was built on multiple residents and pay the rent. When you got an apartment, 3 or 4 bedrooms, you kept one or whatever you kept for yourself, the rest you rented out. So Harlem had great places to live, more churches and bars probably than any other place in the country. But there was not a great intellectual place to live. And Lenox Terrace, I think, filled that need, and probably still does. If I had my choice, I still would prefer Lenox Terrace with reservations to most of the places I see in Harlem today. But if you're talking about moving to the plaza down 59th Street, well, I'll take that over. I'll tell you what, I'll trade the plaza for Lenox Terrace. How's that?